I was 25 when I took the night shift job at a safe house for underage girls. These weren't just runaways. They were girls who had escaped abuse, violent homes, or men who wouldn't stop following them. This place was their lifeline, the one chance to feel safe without looking over their shoulder. From the outside, the shelter looked like any other two-story family house. Neutral paint, trimmed hedges, no sign to give it away. Inside, it tried to feel like home. Hand-me-down furniture, posters on the walls, a kitchen that always smelled faintly of noodles or hot chocolate. But you couldn't ignore the locks. 3 on the front door, bars on the lower windows, a camera above the porch. The whole building whispered, "We're hiding." I understood the girls more than I let on. No, I hadn't lived their exact lives, but I knew what it was like to feel small, watched, unsafe. Maybe that's why I was good at the job. I wasn't just a worker. I was the protector, the one who promised them that if anything happened in the night, I would be the one to deal with it. And I meant it. The safe house wasn't just a roof over their heads. It was a system, strict but necessary. Most of the girls stayed for weeks, sometimes months, until social workers could figure out something more permanent. The rules were clear. No one was allowed to share the address, no posting online about where they were, and absolutely no contact with people who might put them at risk. Phones were a touchy subject. Some girls were allowed to keep theirs under supervision. Others had them taken away if the risk of being tracked was too high. Every door had alarms. The front and back doors were triple locked, and a security camera pointed at the porch 24/7. Even the windows upstairs had sensors that would go off if they were opened past a certain point. At first, the girls complained that it felt like a prison. But after a week or two, most of them admitted it was the first time they'd felt safe in years. The staff rotated in shifts. During the day, there were social workers, therapists, and volunteers, people who could guide the girls through paperwork, schooling, or just being kids again. By evening, one staff member stayed until the overnight worker arrived. From 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., it was just me. No backup, no other staff on site. If anything happened, I was the first and only line of defense until the police arrived. My tasks were simple on paper. Keep the logbook updated, check the cameras now and then, make sure the doors stayed locked, and, most importantly, be there if one of the girls needed someone. Sometimes that meant sitting on the couch with a girl who couldn't sleep, listening to her talk about nightmares. Other times, it meant gently telling them to get back to bed when they tried sneaking into the kitchen at midnight. That night, everything seemed routine. Around 11, I'd walked through the house, double-checked the locks, glanced at the monitors. Upstairs, I could still hear the muffled sound of a couple of girls whispering in one of the rooms. Others were already asleep. I poured myself a coffee, sat at the desk by the front door, and opened the logbook. The house was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock and the occasional creak of the floorboards as the house settled. Peaceful, but not relaxed. It was the kind of silence that always carried an edge, like the world outside was holding its breath, waiting for something. By 1 a.m, the house had finally gone still. Even the whispers upstairs had faded into sleep. That's usually the quietest stretch of my shift, the hours where nothing moves, where even the street outside feels deserted. Normally, I welcomed it. But that night, the silence pressed down heavier than usual. I sat at the desk, pen tapping the open logbook, eyes flicking between the clock on the wall and the front door. Every creak of the old floorboards made me sit up straighter. Every car that passed on the street outside felt louder than it should have, headlights briefly cutting across the curtains before disappearing again. I got up to make another round through the house, more to shake off the unease than out of duty. The locks were fine, the kitchen empty, the back door secure. The girls upstairs were all asleep now. The faint sound of soft breathing behind their doors was strangely comforting. For a moment, I let myself believe I was imagining the tension. But when I came back downstairs, I caught myself stopping short in the living room. Something felt off, though I couldn't have explained what. The air felt heavier, the kind of heaviness you notice only when you're standing completely still. I pushed it aside, went back to the desk, and forced myself to sip the now lukewarm coffee. That was when I heard it. Not loud, not dramatic. Just 3 slow knocks on the front door. At first, I told myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe someone lost, confused, maybe even the wrong house. But the girls upstairs had already gone silent, as if they knew before I did that this wasn't normal. I turned toward the door, my pulse loud in my ears, then a man's voice. Calm. I know she's in there. It felt like my whole body turned to ice. Not someone, not something vague. He knew exactly why this house existed and exactly who he was looking for. I stepped back fast, grabbed the phone, and called the police with shaking fingers. My voice cracked as I gave the address, the operator telling me to stay calm. Easy for her to say. Another 3 knocks, deliberate, echoing through the whole house. Upstairs, a door creaked, one of the girls moving closer. I wanted to yell at her to stay put, but I couldn't make a sound. I stood in the living room, clutching the phone, staring at the door as the voice outside whispered things I couldn't quite catch. The girls didn't make a sound. I think they knew, as well as I did, that we were balancing on something thin and dangerous. Finally, faint sirens in the distance. The shadow outside shifted, then pulled back. By the time the patrol car rolled up, the porch was empty. The police searched the street, but there was nothing. No car, no footprints, no man. Just me, standing there with a house full of terrified girls who were depending on me not to fall apart. That was the longest night of my life. I stayed strong until morning, because I had to. But even now, years later, I can still hear that knock and that voice outside the door. Calm. Certain. I know she's in there. I worked the night shift alone at a small logistics warehouse. Nothing fancy, 1-floor building, 2 loading docks, a dozen security cameras, and a staff lounge. My job was to monitor shipments coming in and out, do occasional patrols, and stay awake. That was it. Most nights were quiet. By 2 a.m, even the highways outside were dead. The hum of the vending machine in the break room was sometimes the loudest sound in the building. You get used to the silence. You even start to like it. It was sometime around 3 when I noticed something off while watching the monitors. I had been staring at the screens for a while, one eye on the feeds, the other half asleep. That's when I realized the vending machine in the break room looked different. On camera 4, the close-up angle, the machine's screen was dark, just this dull shape sitting in the corner. Normally it glows a soft bluish green, hard to miss. I figured maybe the bulb finally gave out or the machine was turned off somehow. Just to double check, I switched to camera 6. That one shows a wider view of the break room, including part of the hallway. And there, the machine looked fine, lit up like always. I flipped back and forth a few times, trying to make sense of it. Camera 4 showed it off, camera 6 showed it on. Same time, same room, different picture. It wasn't a big deal, at least not at first. I assumed it was a glitch. The cameras in that place weren't exactly top of the line. Things bugged out now and then. Maybe one of the lenses was going bad, or the feed had a delay. Either way, I made a quick note in the log just so I wouldn't forget. Still, it stuck with me more than it should have. I kept thinking about it while I finished the round. It was such a small thing, but when you're alone in a quiet building at night, those small things tend to get under your skin a little. I didn't feel scared exactly, just unsettled, like something wasn't quite adding up. About 40 minutes later, I was doing a routine walk through the building, just stretching my legs, really. The place was dead quiet, as usual. No trucks scheduled, no lights on in the docks. That kind of silence has a weight to it when you're the only one awake for miles. As I passed the break room, I glanced inside. Just a quick look, nothing intentional. But something felt off. It took me a second to realize what it was. The vending machine wasn't where it usually sat. It had shifted, not by much, maybe an inch or two, but just enough to notice. It was slightly off-center from the wall, like it had been nudged or pulled forward a bit. Not crooked, but not aligned the way I remembered. I stood there for a moment, trying to picture how it had looked the night before. I couldn't be completely sure. I hadn't exactly memorized its placement. Still, I had passed that machine every night for weeks. If it had always been like that, I figured I would have noticed. I stepped into the break room to get a better look. No scuff marks on the floor, no debris. Just the machine, sitting there like it had always been that way. I didn't touch it. I don't know why. I just had a weird feeling about the whole thing. I turned to leave, figuring maybe someone bumped it during the day shift, or maybe it just settled weird over time. As I stepped back into the hallway, I heard a dull clack behind me. Not loud, not sudden, just a single, low sound, like something small had dropped or shifted slightly. I turned around and looked into the break room again. Nothing had changed. The vending machine was humming quietly, still lit up, still sitting just off-center. I waited a few seconds, listening. There was no movement, no breeze, no one else in the building. I told myself I was tired, probably just overthinking everything because of that camera glitch earlier. When you're by yourself all night, your brain starts creating patterns out of nothing. I'd seen it happen to plenty of other night workers. Figured maybe it was my turn. I took another slow lap around the floor, partly to clear my head, partly because I didn't feel like sitting still just yet. And still, the whole time, I couldn't stop replaying that sound in my head. Curiosity got the better of me. At around 4:30, I went back with a flashlight and crouched down beside the vending machine. I reached around the back to check the wall, and my hand brushed something soft. Something fabric. There was a thin, rolled-up blanket stuffed between the wall and the back of the machine, and next to it, a crumpled paper bag, some candy wrappers, and a half-empty water bottle, all hidden behind the vending unit. Someone had been sleeping there. I stood up fast, heart pounding. The break room door was the only exit. No windows, no other hiding spot. Whoever had been back there wasn't anymore. I checked the camera logs. Nothing. Somehow, the footage for the break room from the last several nights was corrupted. Black screen, static, gaps in time. I called the building manager at 5 sharp and told him everything. He didn't even sound surprised. He sighed and said it wasn't the first time something like that had happened, told me to keep my door locked for the rest of the night, and said he'd send someone in the morning. The next night, I called out, put in my resignation, and never went back. I still don't know what unsettled me more. The idea that someone had been hiding there, or the way the manager didn't seem even a little bit surprised. I haven't worked a night shift since. A few years ago, I worked the night shift at a small petrol station on the edge of town. It wasn't a 24-hour busy highway stop, more like a lonely little station that got maybe one customer every half hour after midnight. From 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., it was usually just me behind the counter, a coffee machine keeping me awake, and the constant buzz of the fluorescent lights above. The quiet could be peaceful at times, but other nights it felt like the building itself was holding its breath. The first half of the night passed quietly. A couple of truckers stopped for fuel. One guy came in for cigarettes, and then it went completely dead. That was normal for weeknights. Still, there's something different about the silence in a petrol station at night. It's not like being home alone. It's heavier, full of little noises that play tricks on you. The buzzing of the lights, the hum of the refrigerators, the occasional tick of the coffee machine heating up. All of it blends together until your mind starts asking, was that sound new? Has it always been like that? I kept pacing the shop floor, straightening snacks on the shelves, checking the pumps out the window. Anything to keep myself moving. At one point, I thought I heard faint footsteps outside on the forecourt. When I looked through the glass, nothing was there, just the dark stretch of road and the empty pumps under the pale lights. I told myself it was just the building settling, or maybe my own shoes scuffing on the tiles. But later, while sweeping near the front doors, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. A figure was standing at the far end of the forecourt, right at the edge where the lights barely reached. They weren't moving, just standing. At first, I thought it was a customer, maybe deciding whether to pull in, but there was no car, no movement at all. I stepped back inside and locked the doors. Policy said they should be locked anyway. When I looked back, the figure was gone. No sound of footsteps, no vehicle pulling away, just empty concrete under the flickering light. That's when the atmosphere inside the station shifted. I didn't want to admit it to myself, but from that moment on, I felt like I wasn't alone. I tried to shake it off, telling myself maybe I had been overtired and imagining things. But not long after, I started hearing faint noises inside the shop. It sounded like a packet of crisps being crumpled, or something shifting on the shelves. The aisles were short, so I could see over most of them, but when I walked around, I didn't find anyone. Then, while standing in one aisle, I heard the automatic door chime go off, the same sound it makes when someone walks in. My heart sank. The doors were still locked. I went back behind the counter and pulled up the CCTV feed on the monitor. At first, everything looked normal. Empty aisles, empty forecourt. But when I rewound the footage from a few minutes earlier, my blood ran cold. On the screen, I could see the door opening slightly, just enough for the chime to trigger, and then closing again. The problem was, I had physically locked that door, and I was standing only a few feet away when it happened. I replayed it again, staring at the grainy footage. No person entered. No one left. Just the door opening a crack on its own. The rest of that shift was the longest of my life. I sat behind the counter, staring at the monitors, clutching the small stick I used to prop the back door shut. Every creak of the shelves, every hum of the refrigeration units made my pulse jump. Around 4 a.m., I thought I saw the same figure again on the camera feed, standing at the edge of the petrol pumps, just outside the circle of light. But when I blinked and looked again, the space was empty. When my relief finally came at 6 a.m., I didn't even explain. I just handed over the keys and walked straight out into the daylight, shaking. A week later, I quit. To this day, every time I stop at a petrol station late at night, I can't help but glance at the doors and the CCTV cameras. wondering if someone, or something, might be standing just outside the lights watching.